High school student in Delaware filing a lawsuit over district's hybrid learning program. Fox 5 legal analyst Wendy Patrick joins us now to explain. Wendy, good morning.
Good morning, Raul.
Okay, so here's the deal. Everybody's trying to deal with this distance learning, hybrid learning, in class, not in class. What is this particular lawsuit all about?
Well, believe it or not, this is actually a civil rights lawsuit. And here is the argument. Apparently, the remote learners are only receiving half the amount of time with their teachers. Now, what does that do, Raul? It puts them at a competitive disadvantage academically, emotionally, and prospectively economically, particularly because it may affect their ability to have the grades they need to get into the college of their choice. We all know how hard that is nowadays. So this is a federally filed lawsuit, and while we all recognize that back to school means from the classroom to the courtroom in many jurisdictions, you can imagine many other people are watching this trying to figure out if maybe they have a similar lawsuit.
But the circumstances surrounding what's happening in the world, in the U.S. and everything else is just beyond anything we've ever seen before. So how does that apply to something like this?
Well, that would be the argument that obviously we have to sort of have a complicated workaround to deliver the same type of education. But here, Raul, it's not the same education. If you have remote learners only able to spend 1 day a week with teachers on Zoom, whereas the hybrid group, which gets to come into class twice a week, they have one-on-one face-to-face instruction with the teacher, then what do you have? You have a 50% decrease in the amount of time with your teacher, and that is significant. So it's not the same. And you can say, oh, pandemic, we have to do it remotely.
Sure.
That's fine, but hybrid can't mean half. And that's the problem here. You have half the amount of one-to-one instruction with teachers than you do if you're actually physically in the classroom, and that's not right.
I wanted to find out what the student hopes to accomplish here in terms of having some sort of standard way of teaching throughout the country, because every single district, even here in San Diego, is kind of doing their own thing.
Well, that's right. And if you do that, that's fine. But it is what the student is seeking here is an injunction. In other words, they're trying to say, we don't want hybrid to mean half. We want to have the same amount of face time, whether it's remote or whether it's in person. That shouldn't be too much to ask. That's the argument.
Yeah.
So, and that's what differentiates this lawsuit from so many of the other complaints. I mean, you can complain all day long that, oh, it's not the same college experience, being there in person, but then the pandemic restrictions, you obviously have to account for those. But the problem here, and what makes this lawsuit different, Raul, is you can't say it's less instruction, it's less one-on-one, it's less teacher time than if you were there in person. That's the difference.
What's going to happen here? How do you see this playing out?
Well, it is true that it's a case of first impression, but what many school districts will probably try to do is say, okay, it's true we're learning on Zoom, but we can't make it less learning. We can't give them less access. It has to still be an equal access to education. So, for example, maybe you say, okay, so it's 2 days a week on Zoom in the same way that the kids that are coming in live have 2 days a week with their teacher. Right. Not with a teaching assistant, not with an aide, not with a paraprofessional, but actually with the type of person who's supposed to be teaching that class. And other jurisdictions, you can imagine they're either hiring people or trying to figure out how do we allocate the resources we have so we don't also find ourselves headed from the classroom to the courtroom just like they are in Delaware.
Because I was just about to ask you how that's going to impact San Diego, how that's going to impact other school districts, for example, going forward, depending on what happens with this particular lawsuit.
That's exactly right. So, you know, we always like to say it's great if we can learn from other people's mistakes rather than learning from our own, although we remember our own the best. But that's what people are doing here is they're looking and saying, this could be us. If we make a distinction between the way and the quality and the quantity of hours with a teacher we provide our students simply because they're at home. One more thing, Raul, that makes this lawsuit particularly sympathetic. The student that's suing can't go to school because the mother that she lives with is immunocompromised.
Oh boy.
So it's not even a choice. Oh, well, you could be in class 2 days a week. Nope, no, you can't. If you have somebody at home that you have to care for.
So many different elements and things to consider. Wendy Patrick, as always, thank you.
Thanks, Raul.